time for another Instagram Live, and I'm very excited today. I'll be talking to a chocolate scientist, a PhD researcher focusing on cacao. And of course, we will have so interesting things to learn and discuss. So everyone watching, feel free to write your comments in the chat. And of course, this will be recorded as well. Lovely.
Hi.
To see you, and so can you
I
hear?
hope, wait, yeah, I can hear you, but the connection is not optimal. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Well, so
Wait.
I can hear myself. There's an echo, it seems like. We'll see if it works.
Wait, can you repeat? I just turned off my Wi-Fi and I'm on mobile data because I think it will be better for you. Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead. Sorry. Yeah,
Now
it's
it's
better now.
yeah, good. Now I just heard myself, but now it's fine. So I hope you and everyone else can hear and you're okay. Otherwise, just let me know in the comment and we'll make it work. So for those of you who don't know, this is Helena, a PhD researcher, and I'm so excited to dive deeper into your research. I already know a little bit, but now we will be sharing it with the world. And for those of you who don't have time to stay with us during this hour, you can watch the replay later on my feed, of course. So, can you please introduce yourself and tell us how you fell in love with cacao?
Yeah, so actually my cacao journey started, maybe first I'll introduce myself, of course. So my name is Helena. I'm a PhD researcher from Belgium. I'm working currently at the University of Ghent in East Flanders in Belgium. My cacao journey and the love for cacao, it started actually around 8 years ago. I got the opportunity to do an internship in Malaysia for a Belgian cacao, chocolate company. And it was for my master thesis. So I'm an industrial engineer in biosciences. So for my master thesis, I did research on the fermentation of cacao. And there, on field, I fell in love with the fruit and the tree and just everything around it. And I just think the chocolate process itself, it's a magical process. It's crazy how someone or people just like invented the chocolate. Then I started my PhD afterwards because I really wanted to do something further with research and with cacao. And I looked for professors at the Ghent University to see if I could start up a project with them. So now 7 years later, I'm quite finished. I'm really finishing the last things of my PhD. So in a couple of months, I could be able to call myself Dr. Helena Evertaert. So that's how I enrolled in cacao, actually.
I love that everyone has their story. It seems like you can work with cacao without having a heartfelt moment of some kind. It grabs us. And if you tell us a little bit about your research at the moment, what has it been about? What's the main focus?
So in my project, I'm the main researcher and actually like the only researcher. So I had to like focus on something in cacao because cacao research is just too broad to focus on everything, of course. So my PhD is specifically on cacao from Vietnam because, Vietnam has a lot of potential. The climate and some bean to bar makers have already shown that the cacao from Vietnam is a very good cacao. So the aim of my PhD was actually to look into the potential of this cacao, specifically from Vietnam, and three main parts. So I started actually at the tree, so on fields where I looked at the genetic background of cacao from Vietnam. And then based on this information, I selected some types of cacao to do a more chemical characterization and to see what the quality is of these cocoa beans, because fermented and dried them according to the local farming practices. So I wanted to see what the quality is and what the chemical composition was of these beans. And then I processed them further into cocoa liquor. So the cocoa mass, the intermediate product, which is necessary for chocolate. And this cocoa liquor, I researched further on the flavors. So on the one hand, instrumental analysis, and otherwise we have a trained panel here at the university. So some trained sensory members tasted the liquor to see what the flavor is of this cacao. And then in the end, I could say which types of Vietnamese cocoa have like the most potential. Yeah. So that's in a nutshell what my PhD is about. Yeah.
It must be so hard to like summarize it so short, but so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's just you start in the beginning, you have an idea. I think it's with every researcher. You have an idea, I want to research cacao in Vietnam, and then I started with the genetics, and then through the years, we have to make decisions. Okay, we can go more there or more there. But yeah, it has its limitations, of course, because yeah, you have the influence of a lot of biological variation which occurs during the process. So yeah, it's not easy because it's very broad, but in the end it's very interesting because I learned about almost the whole chocolate process and I really, really love every part of it. So yeah.
I feel you. I'm the same way. It's
Yeah.
every step is beautiful and so interesting. And
Yeah.
when it comes to your results and your findings, what can you share with us already?
Well, so for the flavor, because in the end, yeah, the flavor is the most important, I think, for the consumer and the final product. I have to say I didn't process any chocolate in the end because there's a minimum amount of cocoa liquor which is needed to be able to process the chocolate. And I only produced everything on very, very small scale. So I had to stop my research on cocoa liquor and yeah, in the future I can further process it in the chocolate. Now, what is specifically for Vietnam and actually Asian cocoa, they say that it's more sour. It tastes more acid, more sour. That's what a lot of literature and farmers and people in the cocoa world say. In general, Asian cocoa tastes more sour. So on the one hand, I really wanted to see, is it really true that these Vietnamese cocoa tastes more sour? If it's processed locally, then is the sourness, is it excessive or is it like acceptable? Because when I heard first about sour, I thought immediately about like a lemon or something. And I think if a chocolate tastes like a lemon, yeah, but like a very intense lemon, it's too sour, I think. So that's something that I wanted to check if it was like a very high acidity, and then also if there were like clear flavor differences between my different samples. So for the sourness, I really indeed saw that some of the types of cocoa indeed had a higher sourness compared to an African liquor, for instance. But it was not a negative sourness. It was like, for instance, if you taste red berries, I don't know if everybody knows them. It's like a very small berry, which is mostly grown in Europe, I think. So I don't know if it's grown in Africa and Asia. but it has like a fruity sourness. And I think for all my samples that I got, the ones that had sourness are more fruity sour. So it was a good sourness and it was not excessive, the sourness. And then what I also found in my samples is that there are a lot of compounds which indicate that the cocoa from Vietnam has fine flavor properties, has fine flavor characteristics. So yeah, to conclude, I have to say that the cacao, the samples that I analyze, have a lot of potential to be like good, very good types of cocoa, but to like really make this sure and confirm this, we should repeat the analysis and the experiments over the years, over different harvest seasons, and of course process them into chocolate, because I think there's very few consumers who like the cocoa liquor, I think.
Well, it's definitely a lot fewer.
Yeah. Yeah.
We never know what the future will bring.
No, that's true. I like it in the meantime. So I'm also part of the trained panel here at university, and we have one panel which we use for the cocoa liquor and then another one for the chocolate. In the beginning, I also thought it just tastes bitter, but then when you start to taste the cocoa liquors from different origins or different processing conditions, you really learn how to taste very minimal differences. And yeah, it's crazy the amount of different flavors that are present in the product. It's crazy, and yeah, it's beautiful, I think. Yeah.
And just to make sure everyone listening, because we have listeners who are experts on cacao and chocolate, as well as people who just love it. So what is a liquor?
Yes. So, well, I'll start just from the tree. So on the tree, you have the cocoa fruits. Yeah. If you look at Sana's background and her earrings, those are the fruits. Yeah. So they are called cocoa pods. And inside those, you have the cacao seeds. These seeds, they are fermented and dried. And then you have like the typical brownish fermented dried cacao beans, which are used to make the chocolate in the end. Now, what is the cocoa liquor? It's actually the fermented dried beans. They are roasted. So it's a heating process which is applied for a specific time on a specific temperature. And after the roasting process, the shells are taken off, and then actually a grinding process takes place. So the cocoa beans, the fat comes out of the beans, and they are really like grinded into a thick paste, which is called the cocoa mass. I use both terms because I think for people who are not in cacao, cocoa liquor might seem like an alcoholic drink, but it's nothing like an alcoholic drink. So it's like a very thick paste, a cocoa paste. No chocolate, of course. Yeah.
And no, so you taste the pure cacao.
Yeah.
And when you've done these experiments, you use the exact same roasting profile for all of the...
Yes, so I actually researched 15 different cultivars then, so from one experimental farm, because I wanted to neutralize as much as possible the environmental, the impact of the environment. And these 15 I processed as much as possible in a uniform way. So for the fermentation and the drying, it's not always easy because these are still biological processes. But for the roasting, I really set everything on the exact same time, exact same temperature. Although I have to mention, I think for every type of cocoa, there might be an optimal roasting condition to bring out the full flavor potential. But so roasting was not, it was not my main thing for my PhD. So, and I didn't have time either, nor material, sufficient material to investigate this. But I'm convinced that by varying the roasting conditions, a lot of different flavors can come out. Yeah.
I mean, these are the beautiful things that we want more people to understand. How you handle
Yeah.
the cocoa beans every step of the way changes the
Yeah.
flavor. So what you're doing is so interesting because you look at it as uniform as possible to notice differences, and then a chocolate maker who would make chocolate to sell, they could
Yeah.
get those beans and they would play with, okay, how do I want to roast it to get out flavors?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's understandable that you don't have the time within the frame of research to try to roast different, like, because roasting, as a lot of us know, is incredibly complex as well.
Well, yeah, I think the most complex processes are the fermentation and the roasting. But actually, more and more recent research has shown that even the maturity, so meaning the level of ripeness of the fruits on the trees, has a very high impact on the starting composition of your fruits, of your beans. So actually, the variability already starts in the beginning. So I think, yeah, roasting is very complex, but I just think the whole chocolate process is, yeah, it's a very complex thing, but it also makes it beautiful, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, for the question, I don't know, Sana, how you normally do it. You like the questions from the people you,
yes, I always want questions. So ask questions. If we see them right away and they fit in where we are, we take them right away, or I keep track of them and we'll get to them later. So you don't have to stress about seeing them in case there's a lot of comments. But we can take this one right away because it is
yeah.
just what we talked about. So is there any difference between cacao mass, cacao liquor, and cacao paste?
So as far as I know, and the terminology that we use in our lab, the cocoa mass and the liquor is the same, and the cocoa pastes. Well, I think maybe commercially there might be like products available, cocoa paste, that just have a high content of cocoa, but are like where sugar or something is already added. So I don't know for sure about the cocoa pastes. I think it might be used as the same as cocoa mass, but I think it's also a possibility there is paste like available, which is not like the pure cocoa mass. So that's how I use it, and I know, but the terminology is not like very fit. I think it depends a bit on which group, research group, or where you are. I think, yeah.
Yeah.
If that answers the question, yeah.
I think it does. And it's an important question in general,
Yeah.
when we talk about science, to know, okay, what does this word mean to the person talking, so that
Yeah.
they understand what they are hearing,
Yeah.
what we are talking about. So thank you for that question.
Yeah. Thank you.
And now we are diving into both, like, well, every aspect of your research, really. We talked about the flavor, and you mentioned that you talked about 15 different cultivars. And if we're going to dive deeper into the aspect of genetics, so
Yeah.
can you first tell us a little bit about cacao genetics in general, so people who don't know about cacao genetics, that they will understand what we're talking about, and then we can
Yeah.
dive into your research.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start from the basis. So in the past, and actually in general, there's three main cocoa varieties. It's Criollo, Forastero, and Trinitario. Well, Trinitario is actually the hybrid, so like the child of Criollo and Forastero. Now, these distinction between these three is actually mainly based on the morphology. So the morphology meaning how do the fruits, the fruits, their color, their size, also the disease resistance of the trees, and so forth. Now, they've seen by doing genetic research that there are also, of course, clear genetic differences between these three varieties. Yeah. So that's the basis. Now, I think about 15 years ago or something, there's a paper which was published. It's from Motamayor. If people are interested in papers which I mention or authors, just add a comment, then we can send it to you, or we can just give you the reference. So Motamayor, he did research on a lot of cocoa trees from Southern and Central America. Why there? Because there is the origin of cocoa. According to the research and the history investigations, they know that really the origin of cocoa, the first trees were over there in South and Central America. So they saw by doing genetic research, so research of the DNA, like every human being also has the DNA. They saw that there is actually not just the 3 varieties, but there is a lot more. So within the Forastero variety, they found 9 other sub-cultivars, let's say, so that are genetically very different. So that's the basis, I think, that you need to know. Now, you might be wondering how this genetic research is done, because, like, you know, if they want to analyze our DNA, they can take our saliva or something, and then they put it in a machine, of course. Now, for the cocoa, most genetic research is done on the leaves of the tree. Yeah, so they take the leaves, and then you have to do an extraction protocol. So an analysis in the lab, in the chemical lab, with a lot of solvents to take out the DNA out of the leaf. Yeah, and then this DNA you will investigate by using specific parts of the DNA and analyze these, or what is done more and more currently is just like sequencing the whole genome. So the whole DNA, because the DNA is a sequence of all letters. If you put this in the machine and the sequencer, you just get from one cacao sample the whole sequence. So the whole sequence of all the letters. You get like a lot more information than by focusing on a specific part, of course. But it's more expensive, but it's more and more done currently. So that's a bit the background of the genetics. I hope that's clear already a bit. Yeah. So then to continue to relate it to my research. So we knew from the farmers in Vietnam that the types of cocoa that were imported there once, because as I mentioned, the origin of cocoa is not in Vietnam, it's in Southern and Central America. So the spread of the cocoa was done by the humans a lot, all over the world. Well, cocoa grows between 20 degrees north and south of the equator. It's called the cocoa belt. So Vietnam is also included there. And the farmers and the researchers from Vietnam, they told me that it's mainly Trinitarios and Forasteros. Yeah, so the 2 of the 3 groups which I mentioned in the beginning, 2 of the 3 varieties that were imported once in Vietnam. But they just started doing experiments on field and breeding different, they started to make crossings between different types that were imported. But they didn't really know anymore what really the genetic background was of the different trees that were present in Vietnam. So that's why I did the genetic analysis at the beginning of my PhD, because I needed to know in the beginning what was the genetics in where does the Vietnamese cacao is located in the 10 genetic groups, which were found from Motamayor. I needed to know this information to be able to further research them, because by just using the morphology on fields, I think a lot of wrong conclusions can be made. So it's really necessary to do the genetic analysis to confirm that this is a specific type of cocoa that you're working with, and to really make good conclusions. So that's a bit the beginning. I think it answered, I forgot actually which question that you asked, but
Yeah,
I think it's answered, I think,
yeah.
yeah.
I asked us to dive into the genetics of
Yeah,
this is where we are, and I love it. And
okay.
to I can imagine that it's very time-consuming work,
Yeah,
gather the leaves and do this analysis.
yeah. Well, so the gathering of the leaves, it's quite okay now. There has been, I didn't do the research, but before, yeah, my PhD time, there are papers who did research on what is the best way to transport these leaves. Because if you have a leaf, I'm in Vietnam, it's a tropical wet country. If I just put them in a bag and I fly to Belgium, the chance is very high that there are molds on your leaves, or that they are beginning to rot a little bit, and you need good intact leaves to extract good DNA. So I actually transported them by using silica gel. Everybody knows when you buy shoes, there's often like little paper bags inside with the little balls to take up the moisture. Well, actually, for the leaves, I did the same. So I have a plastic bag. I put the leaf inside with the balls, and when they take up moisture, the color changes. So the ones that I used, they became orange. But yeah, you have different types, of course. So I think I harvested them 3 or 4 days before I could leave, because the farm, the experimental farm where I did my samplings, it was not like next to the airport. It was quite abroad. And every time the color of the silica balls changed too much, I refreshed them. And when I arrived in Belgium, I freeze dried the leaves. So freeze drying means you dry your leaves by applying a very low temperature at a very high pressure. So you really just take out all the water. And then you get very, very dry leaves, and you can just store them for a very long time at room temperature. So I had it once that I did DNA extraction of the leaves, and there was one sample that I didn't get any results, and then I just started again from the beginning. I did my extraction again, and then I think something went wrong with the extraction, but then, yeah, in the end I got results, and I really saw that it's very necessary to have a good pre-treatment of your leaves, to store them, to if it's necessary, to do extra experiments. So yeah, that's one of the issues already that we encountered. Yeah.
And did you, from the beginning, know, okay, there will be 15, or did you find more and decide to focus on this 15?
No, so I went to the farm. Well, I did analysis only on a specific experimental farm in Vietnam. Why? In the past, the types of cocoa that were allowed to be harvested and exported by the farms, it was restricted by the government. So in the past, there were only around 10 types of cocoa that farmers were allowed to grow on their fields and to export and sell to buyers. Now the farm that I cooperated with, it was an experimental farm owned by the University of Vietnam. On that farm, there were around 100, I don't know the exact amount, but around 100 types of cocoa that nothing was known about. Only the facts, if they were disease resistant, what the amount of fruit production was per tree, those types were known, but nothing about the chemical composition, about the genetics, about the flavor. So together with the people from the university there, I selected all the leaves from all those trees, did the DNA analysis, and based on those results, I got a first idea of which ones were more Trinitario, which ones had more genetics from the Trinitario, which ones more from the Forastero. And then I selected 15, well, the number was based on the yield availability on that time. And also I wanted cultivars that have a good disease resistance, have a high yield. And also I selected the ones that had all of them had genetics from Trinitario. Because at the beginning of my PhD and yeah, still now, it is said a lot that the Trinitario cultivars would have more potential for fine flavored beans. So in the end, I wanted to see if this was really true, because the aim of Vietnam is to produce more of these fine flavored beans. The aim is not to become like a very huge cacao producing country, but it's to focus on this flavor and the uniqueness of the flavor of this country. So that's why I selected these 15. Yeah.
And what was your conclusion?
Well, I can't say the names of the of the cultivars, but because I'm still working on the publication, but it will be published. So if people are interested, be patient.
Of course we are.
Yeah, but it will be published for sure. Yeah.
It's very exciting. Can you share something about what has been like the most surprising thing that you came across, or a surprise finding, something you didn't expect?
Well, I have to say in advance, so I applied to local farming conditions, and I did a very small scale fermentation. So actually the amount of beans that I used for my fermentation was quite low. So my processing didn't go like as optimal as I hoped, but in the end, I still used my beans to see what would come out. So it's something that I have to mention. What did come out is, well, I expected just to see like a very high difference between my different cultivars, and to see like a very unique flavor profile per cultivar. But in the end, there were only 3 that had like a very, very unique and different flavor profile from the rest. Which was both seen by the instrumental analysis and the sensory analysis. But I have to say, that's why I started with the comment, I have to say that it might be due to the non-optimal processing conditions. So it's something that is yeah, it's not only my issue, it's something that has been seen a lot by cocoa researchers, that there should be like more standardized controlled protocols to like compare your results in between. And yeah, but I thought it was surprising to see that those 3 were very different. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then I'm sure that you would want to dive deeper in order to be able to see, okay, what happened here? And
yeah. Yes. So, but yeah, then of course you have to start again from the beginning. So from the harvesting and everything else. So it won't be for me anymore. Because after my PhD, well, I see what I will do, but yeah, I think it should be repeated to conclude it again. Wait, there was a question.
So we can have a look at this one first, that they are talking about if there's a possibility to replicate the study, and they have been working on during more than 8 years on evolution, the evolution of
valuation, yeah.
Right. And they're working on single variety fermentation to expose a bit more the flavors.
Yes. Well, yeah. So that's what my issue. Yeah, it's not an issue. So I had the choice when I was on field in Vietnam. I had 2 options, or I did very small scale fermentations, but I kept really my types of cocoa really separate. So 1 box per type of cocoa. Now, I knew in advance that it might be possible that my fermentations were not optimal because the amount that I had was actually insufficient. A solution that is given in literature a lot is if you have a big box. So, for instance, if you do a box fermentation, of course, if you have a big box, that you insert your beans from your specific type of cocoa in a mesh net in the big box, because then you have sufficient cocoa to get the high, because you need a high enough temperature during your fermentation, and you need this amount of cocoa to reach this temperature. So in literature, they give the solution to insert these bags, but I didn't do it because you always have a mixture of the pulp of your cocoa with like the bigger amount of cocoa, and I really, really wanted to keep them separate. But as they are saying, of course, I agree that it needs to be like single variety fermentations, as the person in the comments is mentioning. And they are doing 8 years of evaluation. Yeah, that's what I meant. It should be done, the research, over several years, over several harvest seasons, and then to really see, like, can we make a conclusion? Because the result might also be that the impact of the harvest seasons or of the harvest years is a lot higher than the impact of a specific variety. It might be possible. There are some researches already done, but I think for now, I didn't really find one paper that I really was like, okay, so they really know for sure. There's a lot of suggestions made in literature already. But yeah, so I understand that 8 years you are doing it already. I would also do it a lot longer, yeah.
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 And it's really, thank you everyone for commenting and joining in.
Yeah.
For reading all the comments, even if we don't necessarily read them out loud. They are joining in on the conversation, how.
Yeah, it's lovely to have inputs, yes.
When it comes to temperature and flavor, if they mix, if you don't do single variety. And when you're saying that you didn't have sufficient cacao, is that because you had the harvest from one tree, or did you have several trees with the same genetical variety that you could mix, or?
Yes, I had several trees. But yeah, even then, to really get like one box, I think the minimum is around 40 kgs of wet beans. If I'm correct, yeah, some literature says different things, but it's around 40 kgs, I think, is the minimum to have like a good optimal fermentation. But yeah, I mean, I had around 100 types of cocoa, and there were a lot of beans from every type. But I mean, that's not like it was one farm from one type of cocoa. So on a specific moment, the amount of ripe fruits that were present were not sufficient to have like 40 kgs. And even then, for some types of cocoa, I had more ripe fruits at a specific time, but I wanted to use the same amount for all my types of cocoa. Because otherwise, it's again a parameter which you vary in your processing. So, I know, that's practical issues at the moment. Yeah.
Like you're saying, there's so many challenges and things that you have to take in consideration in a different way, because you're doing research and you need to be able to look at, okay, these are the parameters that you are analyzing. And if we want to dive deeper, we have to do it again and then change the parameters or differently.
Yeah.
And before we move on to the new question, when will and how will people be able to access your paper?
So the papers on the genetics, they are published already. You can look for my name on Google Scholar, or I can send them to you, Sanna, and you can maybe spread them through Instagram or something. The other ones will be submitted to a journal the beginning of next year. So depending on the whole process of reviewing and everything, I hope around halfway next year or something. So there will be a paper more on the fermented dried beans and then one on the liquors, on the flavors. So there's two of them that will be published. Yeah.
So exciting. And
Yeah.
people can drop a comment here or send a message to me and I will help them find it.
Yeah, for sure.
Guide them within. And now we got a question that, of course, continues this topic in general, but has there been research made on cacao trees in greenhouses? So in a completely different kind of environment?
I think so. But do you mean like the impact of the greenhouse then?
It doesn't state in the question. I think they're curious to see if there has been experiments in general of cacao in greenhouses. Write a comment and ask specifically what they what they want to know about cacao in greenhouses. But since we all know that cacao grows surrounded by other things, and we talk about the impact of climate and what we want to check for different harvest seasons. So in a greenhouse, it's a lot more man controlled.
Well, I think, I'm not very sure, but I think there will probably be research indeed more on the impact of the climatologic conditions. So indeed by using greenhouses or just controlled conditions, I suppose there will be research that investigated the impact of the composition of the air, of the temperature, etc., on the growth of the fruits. But I'm not sure. I'm not for sure. I don't know for sure. So, but I think there is. I know there's a lot of in vitro research on the propagation of the seeds, etc. But yeah, that's a bit more into the agriculture part, and that's a bit out of my scope of my PhD. But I am quite sure that there will be research on this. Yeah.
Yeah. We've mentioned this previously when the two of us have talked, that there will be, and there's a lot of research happening within cocoa, and it's really interesting. And you mentioned that you hope that people might be able to pick something up from your research, then continue that. And what other things do you hope to see when it comes to cacao research in the future?
Well, as I mentioned before, in general, I think there's a need for more standardized protocols because there's a lot of very good research which is available and which has been done in the present. But I think it's not easy, and I don't know if the thing that I will say, it's not easy, and I don't know if it will be possible one day, but I think there need to be like standardized samples available to make a comparison with, in a database or something. Because like, for instance, my PhD, I investigated these types of cocoa, these types of Vietnamese cocoa, and I compared them in between each other. But if I would have, for instance, one standardized sample that I know this genetics, this has this chemical composition and this specific flavor, then I would be able to really compare my samples to this standards. And if everybody uses the same standards, and it's a lot easier to compare the cocoa in between, because it's so broad, the region where cocoa is grown, and everything has an impact on the final product. So I think we really need a standardization or a standard sample to be able to make more fit conclusions concerning the genetics and the influence of the different processes and the climate. So I hope that this will come. That's one thing. And then a second, but there is a lot of research going on that. It's the link more between the genetics and the flavor. So really like the involvement of the genes, which genes are specifically responsible for the expression of a fine flavor, of a specific fine flavor compound. But I know there's a lot of research going on that, but since it's very complex, it's not that straightforward to solve the problem. But I have quite good hopes that this issue will be solved, and I think it will be very, very good if we have an answer to this issue. Yeah.
It's going to be so interesting to see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, and you mentioned before that you've previously done studies on fermentation. So the question: did you study fermentation, or would you explain what's exactly happening during fermentation? So, saying, could you please give us the back, like the overview of how does fermentation work?
Yeah. Okay. So again, when you have your fruit, inside your fruit you have the wet beans. Yes. So the bean, it's according to the genetic background, it will be a purple bean or a more white bean or something in between, and it's surrounded by a pulp. It's like a very slimy pulp, but it tastes very sweet. So yeah, because the slimy sounds negative, I think it's good. We need the pulp. So what you actually do during fermentation, you take your wet seeds and you put them all together in a box if you do box fermentation, or in a heap if you do heap fermentations. There are other types as well, but I think, as far as I know, those are the two main used. And what happens, so inside the pulp there's a lot of sugar present. And the fermentation, it actually, it's a spontaneous process, naturally. And it happens by 3 types of microorganisms. Yes. The first ones are the yeasts. Yes. So in the beginning, when you have your wet seeds, the yeasts, they use the sugars in your pulp and they invert this into ethanol, to alcohol. So during this process, the temperature will already start to increase, and there will come some oxygen in your heap, because in the beginning it's a closed it's a closed box, a closed heap, and there's no oxygen inside, which is very good for the yeasts in the beginning. Then after this, I think, in general, it's around 6 days, I think, the fermentation takes. So after around 2 days, the heap or the box will be opened, and all the wet beans that are inside will be turned. Yeah. So why does the turning happen? To include more of the oxygen, and to actually stimulate the growth of the lactic acid bacteria. So lactic acid bacteria are the second type of microorganisms that occur during the fermentation. Most of the lactic acid bacteria need this oxygen, and they will produce a lot of other compounds, which are the precursors for the final flavor. Yeah. After 2 days, again, it's on average, the amount of days. I'm just setting, I think it's more clear if I can set an amount of days. After these other 2 days, so after 4 in total, another turning happens, yes. And then in the last part of the fermentation, it's a third type of microorganisms, the acetic acid bacteria, that dominate the fermentation, yeah. So in the end, what you need, or what you will get, it's the formation of the flavor precursors in your beans that will become the final flavor during the drying and the roasting. Well, mainly the roasting, that's one thing. The color in your beans will change. So in the beginning, it's purple or whitish. At the end of the fermentation and the drying, it should be brown. But to have this good fermentation, you need like a high temperature. So to to enable the types of microorganisms to grow, to create their ideal environment. And also the pH in your beans, the pH will decrease. Yeah. So in the end, you have a high temperature and a lower pH. And the pH and the temperature are actually two of the parameters which are mostly followed up during the fermentation to like see, is the process going correctly? So that's in general a bit. I don't want to put in too many details because I think otherwise it might be too complicated.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but there's a lot of nice papers on this fermentation. There's a group, well, I cooperated a bit with them. There's a group at the University of Brussels here in Ghent, a group from Professor Luc de Verst and Professor Stefan Wex. They are working a lot on the fermentations because it was not my topic. But they have a lot of nice, very nice papers and reviews. So if you are interested in the fermentation, please sure look at their papers. They explain it in a very nice way. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so much to learn. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Comments. People appreciate the information that you've been sharing with us today. Is there anything else that you feel, based on what you've learned, that you really want to share? What do you, if when people ask you what is the most important thing to know about cacao, do you have something that this is what you wish everyone would know?
I just wish everyone looks up the chocolate process. And it's actually already in the beginning of my PhD, some friends and family of me were like, you are doing PhD on chocolate. And I said, no, I'm doing chocolate. I'm doing a PhD on cocoa. I said, I might make chocolate. And I know one friend of mine, he was like, okay, so you have the fruits on the trees, you take out the seeds that you said, and then he says like, okay, when done, you just like heat it up or something, and then he had chocolate. And I was like, no. It's very complex. And I think, well, chocolate in Europe for sure, it's just a product which is present in every supermarket, in every shop. But I think it's very important, people, that you have, if you like chocolate, if you like cocoa, and if you look further than the milk chocolates, than the sweet chocolates that you know, because there's a lot of very, very good origin chocolates with a high percentage of cocoa. So everybody who is here and hasn't done it yet, please taste very good cocoa, very good chocolate. The price will be a lot higher, but it's really, really is a specialty product. And cocoa is really, I really love it, of course. That's one thing that I want to say. Then the second one, if you have a possibility to support the cocoa farmers in some way, please do, because I really think they don't get the respect and what they should get, because in the end they make the gold that we need, but most of them don't even know what we are doing with it. So there's a lot of bean to bar producers now, more and more, who are actually like really working together with the farmers themselves. I really want to support this because I think they earn their work. We need them, and they need us and our respect as well. That's the second thing that I want to say. And then every consumer who likes chocolate, please just look at the process for once and think about the fact that it's not just an easy thing, and that there's like a whole complex process going forth. It changed my mind, and suddenly I really thought of it as a special product, and not just some chocolate that you get for Santa Claus or something. So that's a bit what I want to end with, I think. Yeah.
I think that's absolutely a wonderful. I'm like, yes. I agree. I want everyone to understand that to be able to value the cacao, you need to value every step of the way.
Yeah.
And I think you helped a lot of people today, both with really interesting scientific details, and also things making it easy for people who love chocolate on all different levels to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really grateful and happy that you can join me today. Thank you so much. And
Thank you for the invitation.
my and thanks everyone for listening and asking questions. And if you missed the beginning, this will be posted shortly on my Instagram feed. And if you have any further question, you can pop them in the comments, and we will make sure that you get an answer. Thank you so much. And I wish everyone a lovely day or evening or morning, depending on where
Yeah.
you Thank you so much, Helena. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Yes, I wish everybody a very nice rest of the day as well. Thank you for the comments and the questions. And yeah, don't hesitate to ask me anything via Instagram or via Sana. I always love to talk about cacao.
Yes.
Okay,
More chocolate
good.
conversations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Goodbye.
Okay. Bye. Thank you. Bye bye.